In this video, we're going to be building a tile map. The tile map that we have here is for the game Pac-Man. A tile map lets you build a game level using a grid system. This is a really common way to build a level for a 2D game. The map that we have here is static, meaning that it doesn't scroll. This particular map is made up of 4 images, and each image is 32 by 32 pixels. For example, we have a dot, Pac-Man, a ghost, and a wall. To help illustrate the grid system, I'm going to enable a feature that puts a yellow outline around each image. Now you can see the grid. It's made of rows and columns. Contained within each cell is what we call a tile. A tile represents a certain image. For example, this tile over here represents Pac-Man. This one represents a dot. Putting the tiles together can sometimes make a larger image. For example, the walls, the way they're drawn and the way they connect makes it look like a much larger image. This square in the middle here looks like one gigantic wall, even though it's made up of several different tiles. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe, like, and share. With that being said, let's get to the code. So I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code over here, and I got my Chrome browser so we can see live updates of the code that we're writing. We'll go ahead and create a brand new folder by clicking open. And then what I'm going to do is find the folder where I want to create my games. The previous games I've created are here. I'll go ahead and click new folder, and I'm just going to call this tile map and then click open. Let's start by setting up the files that we're going to need for our application. So first file we're going to add is our index.html. We're also going to add a Game.Js. We're going to add a tile map. If you'll notice, it's capital because it's going to be a class. And then we'll create a folder to store all the images that we have, all 4 of those images. Well, let's go ahead and we're going to drag those images in that we're going to need. So there's only 4 of them. There's the ghost image, the Pac-Man, the wall, and the yellow dot. You can find all these images in the complete project, and I'll be linking that in the description. Next, we're going to go ahead and implement our index.html. Really easy to do that in Visual Studio Code. Just put an exclamation, hit tab, and then it makes all that HTML for you. Then I'm just going to minimize this over here so it's easier to see. And we're just going to add some basic HTML that we need to make this tile map. We'll go ahead and we'll add a div. Inside that div, you can just put an H1 if you really want. I'm just putting a title. Probably put Pac-Man, but I'm just gonna put tile map, and then the canvas. So this is where we're gonna do all the drawing too. And we're gonna give that canvas an identifier, and I'm just gonna call it game. And that's all the HTML we really need. Aside from the script tag, we're gonna have the src, and it's gonna reference our Game.Js. And very important, put type equals module because we'll be doing an import. Now that we have this basic HTML, let's get it running inside our browser so we can see these changes as we code. I have a really simple extension installed called Live Server. I kind of recommend that you install that one. It's really awesome. Every time you click save, it'll update over here. I've installed that, and once you have it installed, you can go back to your document, right click on your index.html file, and click open with live server. And then in your Chrome browser, you should see tile map, and there is a canvas. You just can't see it yet. Let's go ahead and add some styling so our application doesn't look so bland. Inside of the head tag, we're going to go ahead and add a style tag. We'll apply some styling to the H1. We'll set the color to light gray, and we'll also align the text center on the screen. Then we're also going to set styling to our canvas, which is called the game. So we'll use the ID selector. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add some box shadow. So I'm just going to add 10 pixels, 15 pixels blur, and we're going to use the color black. So when I hit save, now you can see it looks like it's kind of floating off the screen. And then there's our body. I kind of want everything to be centered. Right now, it's always sticking to the left-hand side, the canvas. So easy way to do that is we're going to use display and set it to flex. Then we're going to use justify content and say the content is centered on the screen. We're going to say the height, and this is going to be mainly for the color that I'm going to be setting. We're going to say it's using 100 viewport height. And the background, what we're going to do is we're going to set something called a linear gradient. And inside that linear gradient, we're going to give it a few properties. These properties will determine how the colors are drawn on the screen. So we're setting a color here and we're using numbers instead of hex. And then we're giving it also a percentage saying where this color starts and stops. And I mistyped that over there, so it's RGB. And then we're going to set a second RGB below here, which I just duplicated that line to 17, 51, and 161. And we're going to set that percentage to be 60%. I click save, and then we get this nice gradient color for the background of our application. With our HTML and CSS out of the way, let's go implement our Game.Js. Even though we're not making a full game and just a tile map, we might as well set up the basic building blocks of a game. Let's do that by opening up the Game.Js file. And inside the Game.Js file, we're going to import our tile map and then get our game loop going. We'll do that at the top of our Game.Js over here. So we just import a tile map from the tile map file. You'll notice I do dot slash, and that means the current directory. So then we have our tile map imported, but if we look at and we go to the development tools in Chrome, we'll see that we're getting an error because we haven't exported a default from the TileMap.js. So that's easy to fix. We just do export default class TileMap. And now that error will go away. Back inside our Game.js, we're going to go ahead and grab a few variables that we're going to be needing. We're going to grab the canvas, and we're going to get that from the document.getElementById. And we're going to get the element called game. So if we go inside our index.html, you can see that it's called game, the canvas. Then from that, we're going to get the CTX, which is the context, what we're going to use to draw to the screen. So we call get context. We give it a 2D context is what we want. Another variable that we're going to want is the tile size. So earlier we discussed that each tile is going to be 32 pixels. And then we're going to initialize our tile map since we imported it. And inside that, I'm going to pass in the tile size. So let's go back inside our tile map over here and implement that constructor. And inside the constructor, we're going to pass the tile size. And then we're just going to set a variable for it. Then back inside our game, we're going to declare a function called game loop. Now you can call this method whatever you want, but I'm going to call it game loop to represent our actual game loop. And then let's go ahead and take our tile map and just call draw on it. So this will be just a little bit of code that we're going to be executing on every single loop of the game loop, even though we're not really changing the screen much, but this is how you would traditionally write your game. And then we'll have our set interval over here, which will take in the game loop and update the screen using that method. And we're going to update it to match our refresh rate. So monitor refresh rate is 60 Hertz. So that means we have to update it 60 times every 1 second. And now we're just going to get an error saying that draw is not implemented. So we can just go inside of our tile map and create a function called draw that takes in the canvas and the CTX. Click save, and now our error goes away. So now we have our basic building blocks for our game here, and we can start to build that tile map. Let's go to our TileMap.js, where we're going to implement that tile map. I've opened up the completed solution over here, and as you can see, our map is made up of these grids. To represent these grids, we're going to use an array. We're going to use a two-dimensional array, actually. So what is a two-dimensional array? A two-dimensional array is the following. It's an array with other arrays inside it. So it's going to look something like this. So this is what two dimensions are. There's the outer dimension, and then we can figure out the number of rows by the number of other arrays inside here. And then we can figure out the number of columns by the number of items that are inside each row. So let's go ahead and implement that. Let's start by making a little legend. That little legend we're just going to do above the map here, and we'll just do as a comment. So 1 will be equal to walls. 0 will be equal to our dots. 2 will be our Pac-Man. And 3 will be the enemies. Now, what does that mean? Well, this will be number 1, 1, 1. The dots will be 0. I chose 0 just because it looks like a dot. And then let's go ahead and implement that first row right there. So to implement that first row, we're just going to go to that first array inside there. I'm just going to put a bunch of 1s. So I have about 15 1s over here that I've added. And that would represent my first row. Then I could build my next row. So the next row has a wall, and then it's a whole bunch of dots in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy the first row, paste it in down here. I'm going to go ahead and replace all of these with zeros. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this nice little feature inside of Visual Studio Code where I can have multiple cursors. And the way that you do that is you select the first item over here, 1, and then you hit Command D on Mac or Control D on Windows. And every time you click it, it will add another cursor. Then I can change all those values in one shot to 0. As you can see, we have a 1 here, and then 0, 0, 0, 0, and then 1, and then click Save. And then we'll add Pac-Man as well over here. So Pac-Man will be number 2. And in this particular example, we have an enemy at the end. So there would be a 3 over there. So let's just go ahead and we'll implement the rest of these rows as well. I'm going to copy that one that we had there again. But what I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to set that 2 and 3 to 0. Then I'll go ahead and just duplicate those lines. And then I'm going to copy that top line over here. And I'll go ahead and close that off. So we have a wall at the bottom. So now basically we have this big enclosure with walls all around, a single Pac-Man, and a single enemy over here. Next thing we're going to want to do is get this Pac-Man level displayed on the screen. So the way we're going to do that is we want to use these images that we have. In this example of a tile map that we're building, we're using individual images. Another way of doing this is with a sprite sheet. So in this example, let's go ahead and just use these individual images. In order to do this, we're going to load our images, and I'll show you how we can do that. Loading images can be a little bit cumbersome, so we're going to go ahead and add a helper method. We're going to call that hash image. Hash means that it's a private method. And we're going to give it a file name it's going to take in. And it's going to create an image object. And that image object, we're going to set a path on it. So we're going to use backtick over here, which is the symbol beside the 1 on your keyboard. And we're just going to create a string. And that string is going to be the path to the images. So it can be images. So we go inside the images directory. And then we give it the file name. So that's the object we're going to pass in there, or the string. Then we'll just go ahead and return that image. Now we can use this helper method to go ahead and load our images in the constructor. So go ahead and define a wall and call that helper method. And all we have to do is give it name of the image with the extension. Then do the same thing for the rest of the images. So we'll grab our Pac-Man. We'll grab the dot, the ghost. And if you make a mistake with your images, what's going to happen is you're going to get a 404 error. So make sure to keep your console open. So I called this one Pac-Man, and this one's called Pac-1 because that's from the game development tutorial on Pac-Man that I had. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just rename that image because Pac-Man seems like a better name for it. And then I'll save it, and that error message will go away. Before we draw our map, let's set the canvas size. The canvas right now is kind of tiny and won't really fit our map. Now, the information that we know about our canvas is we know that each tile is 32 pixels. So inside of our draw method over here, we're going to create a new method, a private method called setCanvasSize. And that's just going to take in the canvas that we're passing into our draw over here. And then we're going to go ahead and implement that method. So setCanvasSize takes in the canvas. And then inside here, all we need to do is set the canvas height. And the height's going to be equal to the number of items in our array. So we'll say this.map.length times this.tilesize. And then if I hit save, you're going to see that our map grew. And then we do exactly the same thing for the width, except for the width, we want to know the number of columns that we have. So that's really simple. All we have to do is take the first row inside that array and then do .length. So that's just getting this array over here and then getting the length of that array. And we do the same thing. Now watch, as I hit save, you're going to see that this grew wider. Next, we're going to go ahead and clear the canvas. So we'll do that inside the draw method. And we're going to create a method called clear canvas. It's going to take in the same properties that we have inside of draw, so the CTX and the canvas. Then we'll go ahead and define that function below here, and we'll pass in those same properties that we have right here, the canvas and the CTX. And all we need to do is say ctx.fillStyle is equal to black, and then ctx.fillRectangle. We need to give it an X and a Y coordinate, so that's going to start at the corner over here. And then we're going to make something that's the same width and the same height as the canvas. And then click Save, and we have cleared the screen. Now we can go ahead and add another method called drawMap. We'll add the drawMap function. And all it's going to take in is the CTX. Now let's go ahead and draw that map. The way we're going to draw the map is we're going to go row by row, drawing every single cell as we loop over it. But one of the simplest ways to achieve this is just to use a for loop. So we'll start by looping over the rows. We'll just set up this for loop over here where we loop over the map. So we figure out from the map what the length of it is, which will tell us the number of rows, and then we just increment that row. Once we get to a row, we start to loop over the column. So that's why I set up a column variable here, and then we loop over the column being less than this .map, and it takes in the row, so the variable from the previous line. Then all we do is get the length of that, which will give us the number of columns in that row, and then column plus plus to loop over each individual one. Then what we do inside here is we can just create a constant called the tile, and that will give us the value of that tile. So we say this.map, and we give it the two variables that we have, the row and the column. And that will give us the value for that particular cell. And that value represents the image that we're going to be using. So next we'll go ahead and we'll define a variable called image, and we're going to set that to null. And that value is going to be controlled by a switch statement. A switch statement which will take in the tile value. So in our first case, we'll say case number 1. If it is case number 1 and it's equal to 1, that value, then we'll say the image is equal to this.wall. And if that's true, we'll break. Then let's go down over here before we implement all of them so we can do this piece by piece. We'll go ahead and we'll add a method called drawImage on our CTX, which is going to draw that image to the screen. And that image, we're going to have to give it an X and Y position to figure out where we draw the image in terms of this column and rows that we have within the grid. We have to find its location. So to start off with, we have that column value. So we can take the column value over here and say this dot times the tile size, which will figure out where we are in terms of the X position. Then to figure out the Y position, we're going to say we're going to take the row times this dot tile size. And then lastly, when we draw that image, so that'll find the position. Then when we draw that image, we also need to give the size of the image. So we'll give it the tile size and this dot tile size. When we hit save over here, it's going to draw some of the bricks. We're encountering an error because the image is null in some instances right now. So what we'll do is we're just going to add a little guard over here. And we'll say if the image does not equal null, then we get our bricks drawn. Let's implement drawing the rest of our images following our legend. So going with the dots, we're going to add another case over here, and we're going to do case 0. You can see it's not formatted nicely, but as soon as I hit save, it'll format it. And we'll say our image is equal to this dot dot, and then we'll do a break, and I'm going to hit save. And now we get our dots. These blank spaces over here, this is where Pac-Man is, and this is where the enemy is. So right now, remember, it's just skipping over anything that we don't have an image for. Now for case 2, what we're going to do is go ahead and draw Pac-Man according to our legend. So we'll grab Pac-Man over here. We'll say this dot Pac-Man and then do a break. And lastly, for case number 3, we're going to go ahead and draw the ghost and do a break there, hit save, and now we have Pac-Man and our ghost. Now we can go ahead and design our level. Current project setup of having live server and being able to save the file and have the changes immediately shown will make it easy to design the map. Also, Visual Studio's multiple cursors makes it easy. So right now I'm just selecting this and then I'm clicking Command D or Control D on Windows, and it's just selecting all those common values one after another and adding a different cursor. So then I can change those values to 1 and click save. Then to do vertical lines down, what I could do on a Mac is I can do Command and Alt and down like that. Then I can have multiple cursors there and change those to 1 if I want to and click save, which is really cool. I could drop 1 down over here and put 1 and then just go modify that last one down there because I don't want that to be 1. And then that'll add another line. And then let's go ahead and just quickly add some over here. So if you learn how to use the editor properly, you can quickly make edits like this. Then in the middle over here, we're going to do is between this wall there, we're going to add like a little block of like a big chunk of wall that we're going to add. We'll make all of those 1. We'll make that one, click save. And there you go. We have a chunk of wall. And then what we'll do over here is we'll do something similar as well. And I'll put a little link in the description to how you can do this in Visual Studio Code to quickly edit your file. And there you go. We'll click save and we'll just do another wall there. Because you always want Pac-Man to typically just run down corridors, not to really go into big open areas. To make this map a little bit challenging too, you could even add more enemies. So anytime it sees number 3, it will draw an enemy on the screen. You want to make it super challenging, there's Pac-Man, put an enemy right beside him. And depending what random direction that enemy decides to move, you might eat Pac-Man right away. But you probably wouldn't do that. But we could probably add an enemy down here. One last thing that we can do is understand exactly how the map is being built. We saw that for loop of rows and columns. Now let's see it in action as the map gets built. So inside Chrome, I've set up a breakpoint, and that breakpoint gets hit just as we draw an item. So every time I click next, it's going to draw a piece of the map. And as you can see, it's drawing the first row, which is all bricks. Then we get to the next row where Pac-Man is and a bunch of the dots and the enemy. And we can see that it draws one after another. So it's kind of cool. Everything gets drawn from the top of the screen, from the top left down to the bottom right, and one row at a time because of this for loop that we have over here. But just wanted to show you that just so you have a really good understanding of how the screen is being drawn. And there you have it. We've designed a map for the Pac-Man game. And that's how you build a tile map for a 2D game. If you're interested in making the full version of Pac-Man, check out my Pac-Man tutorial. In that tutorial, we build a fully functional Pac-Man game, complete with sounds, animations, enemy AI, collision detection, and tackle core gaming concepts. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want to see more, subscribe, like, and share.